Well, thank you guys for coming here today to the Baton Rouge Blues Festival interview stage. And our next guest is the wonderful Anna Popovic. Anna is a world-touring singer, guitarist. She's been based in Los Angeles since 2016, but she's a native of Belgrade, Serbia. Now that's a long way from a place where the blues was born, like Mississippi or Louisiana, that sort of thing. So I was thinking, Anna, first of all, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for
And everybody's looking forward to your performance, which
Thank
will
you.
be at 6:45 p.m. today on the Foundation stage. Well, Anna, you're making your debut at the Baton Rouge Blues Festival. When you're performing in Louisiana, Mississippi, Memphis, or Chicago, do you think about those cities that are the places where the blues came from, and that all of them, I think, can be rightfully called the home of the blues? Do you think about those places, and does that come to your mind? Because, again, you're from so far away originally, from these places where the music came from that inspired you.
Absolutely. I mean, I was born in Belgrade and I grew up on American music and American sound. So mostly stack sound and blues and jazzy stuff sometimes, some of the, a lot of New Orleans, Chicago blues, Texas blues. I have a great excuse to like all different styles of blues because I'm from Europe, so nobody expects me to be a Chicago blues woman or a Texas blues woman. So I like to combine the styles. I love to, I play music that's my own music, but it's very much based on blues. And obviously I listen to a lot of Albert King, Albert Collins, Stevie Ray Vaughan. When I was just a little girl, I was 3 years old. That was on a daily basis in our home.
Yes.
We never heard any Serbian music ever, and we just played blues. I thought that was just a regular thing. My dad had jam sessions at home, and we would just play Elmore James and Booker White, and he would get us around the guitar, and we were like 5, 6 years old, and we would play Albert King, Albert Collins. I fell in love with Sonny Landreth, Louisiana player. I studied Sonny for a long time, Roy Rogers for slide, Elmore James for slide, and all three Kings, obviously Hendrix, so many different, Buddy Guy. I just played with Buddy last night. That was a lot of fun. And,
wow. Where was that, Anna?
Tampa Bay Blues Fest. We closed that show, and it was fantastic. I seen Buddy, when I was 13 in Belgrade, and he came very close to me with his guitar, and I'll never forget that. And he played an incredible show, and so many years later, nowadays I guess it's easier to imagine that because there are a lot of artists coming from Europe, but at that time it was impossible to imagine that a Serbian guitar woman will come and stand on stage next to Buddy Guy. But I always like to evoke those players. As I said, I love Sonny Landreth, I love Roy Rogers. I still go for my own sound. Whenever I play here or Memphis or I come there and I bring what is me, which is a European artist, a female artist. I take a different take on blues, but I'm very happy that ever since I first came here and I was nominated as the first continental European artist to be ever nominated for the W.C. Handy Award at the time, what is now American Blues Awards, that they recognized, okay, there is some blues sound in this lady, and that was in 2003.
Oh, that's marvelous. It shows. I just want to say that all the names you just heard Anna mention, all this, everything that Anna just said tells me that she knows more about blues music than 99.9% of Americans.
Well, I got into it at a very early age. Now that I talk to a lot of my colleagues, some of them say, yeah, it was, in my teens or in my, in my study when I studied. And I'm thinking, okay, I really got into that at a very early age, just 2, 3 years old. That was the only thing. And a lot of my Serbian audience comes sometimes to the States and they want me to play different types of music. And I'm saying, you're on a wrong show, I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. I never listened to it, so.
Well, I'm just curious. You had no interest in Serbian music at all?
No, not really. Not really.
What's it like? What is it like, though? Most of us, haven't heard Serbian pop music, I'm sure.
No, it's very. I mean, I have appreciation for it. I just don't mix it with what I do. But I mean, there's incredible players doing incredible stuff there. Okay. It's not my sound, but it's more like maybe a Turkish influence, or a Greek sometimes, but they're nice songs to be heard. Yeah.
Well, can you say? Now, it was your father who had this great record collection, and your father was an amateur musician.
Yeah.
And he had the blues sessions at your house.
Yes.
Was that like a weekly thing?
It was almost a weekly thing, and I was the only one. I would stay late and listen to them, even being a little girl. My mom and my sister would go to bed, and I was always mesmerized by them, just having fun and just actually spending great time, quality time with a pentatonic scale. That's the only thing you need. They had a whiskey or two, or they had a beer, but they just had fun with playing music, and everybody could just step in. So I stepped in when I was 13 because they didn't have a slide player. Okay. And I learned a few licks of Elmer James, and I could get a few songs. And that was the best way I could spend time around instruments. And I studied guitar, and I thought that was the nicest thing. I'm trying to do that today for my kids, just having instruments laying around, because they should just be surrounded by it and drawn to it, not pushed to study, but just drawn to a beauty of just jamming. Instead of maybe watching television at night, you can just pick up a guitar and maybe play a pentatonic scale.
That's much more productive than watching TV.
Yeah.
It sure is.
But yeah, what my dad and me did back in the day, we made a record now, although he's an amateur musician. That was his first time in a studio in Tennessee, called Blue Room. Those are the songs we used to play when I was back home, and there's some Jimmy Reed on it. There's some, I guess, there's some roots blues. There's some, Tony Joe White, I don't know, Van Morrison, just nice songs and great songwriters that we used to play.
Yeah. When did you think that maybe you could be a professional and start a band? And well, let me ask you, when did you start a band and start performing in public?
I started performing pretty late, when I was about 18, got a band together. I had a few songs that I could play solo on, and I kept to these songs, and I would add another song. I was just a rhythm, and then one solo here and one solo there. And then I remember an American guy was jamming with me in the nightclub at that time, and he said, "Wow, they would love you in America." And that was enough for me. I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna just give it a try.
And you told me earlier when we talked, I guess a few weeks ago, or even more than that, that you started a band. You're in a band. It's not that first band is not called the Anna Popovic Band.
No.
What was it called?
It was called Hush.
Hush.
Yeah.
Like the Deep Purple song?
No, actually, at that time I watched Crossroads movie about the blues, and they had that song Hush. Somebody's calling you and whatever. That's a wonderful. Okay. It's really rootsy and haunting almost, And I thought it was so beautiful. That whole movie was amazing. So
that's a good name.
That's where it came.
Good name for a band. Only in Serbian.
Yeah, we were the first band to sing in English back then. Yeah, and we were on national television singing English, singing blues.
And you pretty much became successful or popular, or at least in demand quite quickly?
I moved to Amsterdam, and I formed the Anna Popovic Band. And in Serbia we played four times a year. It was a very difficult times in Serbia. So Milosevic was still on the regime, and people didn't really have jobs. But we somehow managed to have 4 shows a week, and I thought, okay, that's the way to.
So you were making money.
Well, it wasn't a huge amount, but you could live from it, which was a wonderful thing and very motivating. And I was actually living in New Orleans 5 years after Katrina, and I found that same energy that I had back in Serbia at that time, when people just come out of the big crisis and they just want to do something creative. They feel strong about the city. They want to see it grow. I was very, inspired by, and I still am. My last record is Trilogy. Right. Recorded 2 of those volumes. I recorded right here in New Orleans with Delphio Marsalis, the jazz part. And with George Porter Jr., with Ivan Neville, the funk part. So I'm still very inspired by New Orleans sound.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you go to a city, you made records in Memphis before that, and you made records in New Orleans. You really like to experience the city and soak up the atmosphere, and somehow that affects the music, would you say? It
does, yeah. I think so many people make they come and they want to make a Memphis record. So what they do, they run into the studio, they hire a bunch of Memphis musicians, go through their old Memphis records, choose a few songs and get out, I think the way to experience the city is to stay longer and experience it really. I mean, I gave myself 6 months here, And at that time, and I was recording one of my records, and I really inhaled the city. It was wonderful. We were just out of the Frenchman. We were, my son was just a year and a half. We would go see the bands at 7 p.m.
Okay.
And just enjoy the city and everything that it gives. And then I went and recorded. I don't record New Orleans record because I record on a Popovic record, but I let the city totally influence me in any way, if it lyrically or musically,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were in Memphis. You lived in Memphis for 5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
For 4 years.
4 years? Okay. Well, I'm just curious. You were in Amsterdam. You were in Europe doing well. Why did you make that move to Memphis? And what year was it? Was it 2012?
Yes.
2012, you moved to Memphis from Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Well, I think it was while living in Europe, there was always something like a barrier in between my sound and what I want, because I so strongly was brought up by the stack sound and by, any Chicago blues, what I said, Texas blues. And then while living in Europe, you have European musicians, and it just doesn't sound the same. They're not bad. They're great musicians. It's just it's very hard to keep jumping here and trying to do that. And I think that I understand more the music since I live here. Of course, since I was living in Memphis for 4 years. That's a different thing than Los Angeles, obviously. But it helped me in a lot of ways to really understand it. And above all, I liked living here. We came for a year to try it out and just, we just said, what, we're just going to be here for a year, that's it. But we stayed longer, obviously, and now.
You really did enjoy Memphis then?
I did, yeah, I did.
That's another one of the great music cities of America.
It is,
Yeah.
and I fully explored that, living there on Trilogy again, because I would wake up and say, okay, this song needs to have a Memphis soul rhythm section and a New Orleans horn section. And I want to do the vocals in Nashville, It was literally like that. And I wanted to get every song exactly how I had it in mind. So, okay, sometimes those horns in Memphis are too laid back, they're kind of on the backbeat, and then you come to New Orleans and it's a totally different vibe. And the same for rhythm section, there's a lot of jumpy stuff here and a lot of, there's a lot of energy here, but if you want it laid back, Memphis is the place. So,
okay.
And then on the jazz side, which was my dream come true, because I used to write jazzy songs, but I never recorded it with real jazz cats. Delphio and his crew was just amazing in a way that
Marsalis,
in the way that he,
Marsalis family.
That he even wanted to record with a blues person. Yeah. It's a big thing because like blues and jazz are very similar. They came out of each other, but still on the scene today, you can barely see musicians cooperating blues and jazz musicians. It's more like blues and rock or blues and funk, but it's very rarely, which is very strange. I studied jazz guitar in Amsterdam, and they would never make that parallel with blues, connecting it to the blues. To me, nicest jazz standards are just bluesy,
Yeah.
Ella Fitzgerald, if you listen to Sarah Vaughan, Joe Pass, those are all very bluesy solos and very bluesy, vocals, and that's the beauty of that old school jazz that I think the bluesy side.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you're right. Blues and jazz they are at least first cousins, at least. So that's very wise of you to make that connection. And so you're not...
It took me time to convince Delphio to do it.
Oh, yeah, you had to lobby him to do the record?
It took me some time, yeah. He was, especially with my vocals, when he would listen to that, he's like, okay, can we get rid of this? And can we get rid of this and this and this? And but it's a wonderful thing to do because that's why the vocals on Trilogy on the Volume 3 sound so different, and that's what I wanted. I wanted people to listen to Anna Popovic from early morning to late at night and not hear the same record. And I specifically chose 3 different producers and not having them heard what I've done with any other of the 3 and just approach it from there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I really admire that. That's really ambitious. The Trilogy, by the way, is a trilogy. It's 3 full albums, each one has a different theme.
Yeah,
it's
morning for Volume 1, which is a funk and soul, and midday for rock and blues, and midnight for the jazz city.
Yeah, and that's a wow.
23 tracks.
that's so ambitious. And I know it takes money, a budget to do that kind of thing, but you had this vision and you really wanted to accomplish a three-volume album.
I had this vision for 3 full years, took me to preparation, and I thought if I'm not going to do it now with the music industry going where it's going, this might be the very last moment to do it. And I really had that dream of this trilogy is just wrapping out like that, and then you can choose the style, and if you don't like the style, give it away to a friend that does like it. And it came from some of my fans that said, you know what, I made a compilation of all your blues CDs for me, and then I made a compilation of all your jazz songs for like my wife or for my friend. And then it happened more times, and then I thought, you know, maybe I should make those separate sounds so people can swap them or give them away or just listen to different moods of the day. I think moment of the day is crucial for music to me. Like, I love Hendrix, but I'm not gonna, you know, pour myself a morning coffee and put Hendrix on. Or like, I'm not gonna have some of the jazzy songs while I run, while I jog in the midday. So I always am very specific of the sound and when I listen to specific artists.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's, you know, you might want to hear gospel on Sunday morning or something.
Exactly,
something like that.
Yeah.
And blues is more of a midnight music.
I guess so. Depends. You know, depends. I can always, you know, depends. There's so many different types of blues as well. So.
That's right. So, again, people can get Trilogy just anywhere, Amazon,
yes.
your website.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know you encourage people to do so.
It's a wonderful record. I think it's the, you know, I put a lot of, what I said, 3 years of preparation and a full year of recording in 4 different cities. And we have Bernard Purdy on drums, the most recorded drummer in the history, Herlin Riley, another legend,
Riley
you
from
know.
New Orleans, great drummer.
It was my biggest discovery. And of course, Delphia Marsalis and his crew. We got Joe Bonamassa playing guitar, Robert Randolph playing guitar, George Porter Jr., Ivan Neville, and that's just a few. There's more than 30 musicians, and it really celebrates musicianship and incredible artists.
And Tom Hambridge, who produced so many records by Buddy Guy, and is a Grammy-winning producer in Nashville. He's one of the producers for Trilogy as well.
Yes.
Delphio, and who is the other fellow whose name I forgot?
Warren Riker, and he did a lot of pop artists, and he has kind of a more like a pop approach to the whole thing.
Okay. So, like in your sets nowadays, what are you playing? A lot of Trilogy?
I am. We're going to play tonight a lot of Trilogy. Yeah.
And tonight, again, it's 6:45 today at the Foundation stage. That's the big stage. And how are we doing on time, you guys? About 5 minutes?
Maybe they have some questions?
You know what? That would be a good idea. Do you guys have any questions for Anna?
Thank you. Thank you. I'd love to sign them for you after the show. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Hi. What was the question? How? Oh, it is, you know, I couldn't do it on the flats. I couldn't do it with the flats. It's like, that's the only way I can do it. Never tried it with flats on. Any more questions? Yeah, so he's born in, 52. So at that time when he was a teenager, it was almost impossible to get the records. They would swap them if they would go out. They had one radio station, Radio Luxembourg, where they would play those things. His father broke his first Ray Charles tape or whatever that was, and said that was just whatever, devil's music, or you can't listen to that, and then he had long hair, and then, at school they were chasing him around to cut his hair. So he was really like a hippie generation, and it was so funny. He has a good story. He had a John Lennon small record, the was little ones, and on one side there was one of the beautiful John's songs, and then on the flip side was Yoko Ono's song, where she is screaming out of her brain, just like a crazy. So what they used to do is take that specific record to the beach, and because it's this packed, you can't find a place for a towel, they would put on Yoko Ono, and people would just leave, and they would get a spot, and then they would flip the record and listen to John. Yeah, I don't practice a lot. I practice maybe an hour max at the daytime, and I never use an amp. So I just practice my guitar, and that is just, for me, nobody needs to hear it, and then just some of the fast stuff. So I'm pretty bad with I'm not really, for Trilogy, I definitely took a year to get the jazz chops back in. So I would go online, look for lessons, jazz lessons, look at some of the players, and had a few teachers, and then I was preparing for the jazz record specifically, but mostly I just do, here and there a little bit. Now that I was on the Experience Hendrix tour, Dweezil loves to give lessons to whoever wants to listen, so Dweezil Zappa, yeah. And then he would show me a few things, and it's very hard to repeat that, to play it after him, but I tried.
Well, how about one more question?
Favorite what? Oh, it's so hard, I like Bonamassa very much. He's incredible. Derek Trucks with his slide playing, right? Sonny Landreth always been my biggest influence, Roy Rogers.
Sonny from right here in Lafayette. That's 40 miles from here.
And Sonny was on one of my previous records, which was incredible to have him do a slide duet, and he was so kind to come in the studio and record the slide duet with me.
Well, one more question. What do you love so much about playing blues music and singing blues?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it today. I was getting ready for the show, and I had back in my room, and I'm thinking, the world's gone so crazy again. They're giving us again this kind of a feeling that you're not in control of your future, that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I'm talking like I have family in Holland, I have family in Serbia, and I have obviously family here and friends. And it's like there is no place you can feel safe and you can say, okay, my children are going to be okay here and there, for next 10 years. So I think that moment, like, okay, at least, I'm happy I'm doing what I love, and we do that right now. And we should all just enjoy doing
the
what
moment.
We love. And that's blues music for me.
All right. Thank you so much for being here, Anna.
Thank you. Thanks.